Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 22 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from CA World in Las Vegas. I'm Aaron, and unfortunately Brian is breaking his streak of batting 1,000 and being on every Cloudcast to date. He'll join us next time. Today we have Jeramiah Dooley, Principal Architect for Solution Provider Solutions with VCE, as our co-host. How you doing, Jeramiah?
Great. How are you, Aaron?
Good, good, good. And we are joined by Andi Mann, published author, so I'm going to throw that in there, and VP of Strategic Solutions at CA Technologies. Andi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Good, good, good. So, Andi, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, apparently I'm a published author. I'm a bit of a big deal right
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I'm VP with CA Technologies, working with the Enterprise and Cloud Solutions Group, dealing with strategic technology. So essentially I'm trying to pull together lots of different products, solutions, capabilities, services to try and just help solve customer problems. Been around IT for longer than I care to mention. 15 years or so in data centers to start with, operator, sysprog, all that sort of stuff. A couple of different vendors, analyst for 5 years, saw the error in my ways, and now I'm with CA Technologies.
Nice. Now, just so everyone out there listening to this later on, we are actually doing this Sunday evening, the first night of CA World, and we just wrapped up the keynote. So in case you weren't aware, the keynote was actually very nice. A lot of heavy hitters there. We had Michael Capellas,
Yep.
CEO of VCE. We had Bill McCracken, CA CEO, and Vivek Kundra. He was actually there and made an appearance. And who was the moderator?
Randy Zuckerberg.
There you go, as well. Randy Zuckerberg, as well, was moderating the session. So, Andi, what did you think of the session?
I thought it was fantastic. It was really interesting. We didn't focus on just CA management technologies. It was about technology and business. Where we've come from, where we're going, what's going to be important, how to treat different device types, what about cyber warfare, security, what's going to help us go to the cloud, what's going to stop us going to the cloud. Some questions from the audience. We were tweeting out questions. They were Randy was catching them on our iPad and asking the guys there. It was just a fantastic round table, open discussion, really interesting.
Great. And we were just talking about this earlier. I'm sure there will be a replay available on ca.com very, very soon. But yes, absolutely fantastic session. If you get a chance, please go see that. And also I wanted to, quick disclaimer, Jeramiah and I both work for VCE.
Yes, we do.
And this being episode 22 of this podcast, I think this is actually the first time we've had anything VCE or employer related. So disclaimer, if you don't want to hear anything about VCE and CA and some of these other things, this isn't the podcast for you, unfortunately, this week.
We'll work hard not to make it a product pitch, though.
Exactly. And really what we're here to talk about tonight is really exactly that, solutions in general and solving business issues. And along those same lines, VCE and CA did a partnership earlier this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so tell us a little bit about that partnership and some of the benefits that have come out in the, say, 6 months or so that it's been out there.
Yeah, look, I'm very excited about that because obviously, CA, we're doing management software mainly. We're not hardware people. We're very hardware independent, and we see a platform like the VC vBlock come out, and to me that's really exciting. I mean, I'm all about cloud and virtualization. I look at that platform, and my first thought is this is a platform for cloud. And one of the things which actually struck me about it when I first saw it a long time ago was the opportunity to do desktop virtualization on that box. The interconnects, the I/O, the memory, these are some of the big blocking points for desktop virtualization.
Sure.
And then you think about how can we work together and put management technologies around a virtual desktop environment that's available on demand, user accessible. That's the sort of thing that we're doing, and that's actually one of the go-to-markets that we're working on together. Is exactly that. It's client management for virtual desktops on a vBlock.
Okay, great. And what are your thoughts around public cloud versus private cloud versus hybrid cloud versus cloud bursting versus everything else you can think about under the planet? Because the reason why where I'm going with that is because me personally and the customers I see, there is an interest in public cloud, but it is more of a they want to see it, but then they also tend to lean towards the private cloud because the private cloud is maybe one step closer to what they're doing today, and that public cloud is maybe something that's a couple of years out yet. What are you seeing in the enterprises you talk to?
Mostly, it's very similar. Private cloud is the cloud of choice today in the larger enterprises that I talk to, and I'm talking to CIOs all around the world and in government, but mostly larger organisations. And there's fear for better or worse, whether it's for real or not, about security, about compliance, about data leakage, and these sorts of things, about downtime and reliability. And you get the fear factor coming in from the big outages, AWS and Office 365, Salesforce.com, And that doesn't necessarily mean that your internal data center is going to be up any better than AWS or Office 365, but there's this perception. And so most of the organizations are steering away from public cloud. That said, I think they don't know that they're using public cloud when they are. Their employees are already doing it, right? Yes. They're using Dropbox, they're using Gmail, they're getting around CIO policy, IT policy by using alternates.
Yes.
Salesforce started that way, right? Yeah. It was the sales organization saying, you know what, our installed Salesforce automation, customer relationship management software is not good enough.
IT doesn't know what we want.
IT doesn't know what we want, so we're going to go outside and do what we need.
Right.
And so, people are doing this. People are doing this already. So the organizations say, "Oh, we're not using public cloud." They don't know they're not using public cloud.
Yep. And another interesting point. I think in an interview you gave with Stu Miniman at EMC World, you brought up a very interesting point in the fact that even if they are using public cloud, you oftentimes have some private cloud kind of drag because it gets the organization, even if it's rogue public cloud, you get acceptance because hey, that public cloud thing it worked, right? Even if it's maybe doesn't exactly fit the needs of the greater enterprise, there's some acceptance level that is kind of drug along.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of rogue cloud. It sounds pejorative, and it's not meant to be. And it's something I wrote about a long time ago, even before I joined CA, about you should let your people use rogue cloud. You should learn from them because they're the bellwethers of this technology. The people who go out and use rogue cloud, they're the early adopters. These are the people who are going to get the skills. They're going to understand what goes right, what goes wrong. Use that. Learn from that. Rogue cloud is a great thing.
And it's actually, if you think about it this way, just the term was never used, but it used to be rogue virtualization.
Yes, indeed.
Yep. It would be somebody playing with VMware. What was it at the time? GSX, whatever, kind of going, hey, you need to do this stuff. It's really, really cool. And then next thing you know, they would turn around and did it, and no one knew. And
and again, it was about IT not doing the right thing. It was about IT developers mostly, right? Saying to IT, I need a server to do this project. IT saying, sure, I'll get back to you in 3 months. The developer saying, but I need to deliver it in 3 months. So they just used the resources they had. They threw some GSX on there, and absolutely.
Yep. So let me ask you this: you wrote a book recently to the published author aspect of you here, right? So the title is Visible Ops Private Cloud: From Virtualization to Private Cloud in 4 Practical Steps. It's a mouthful.
It is. Every good book's got to have a subtitle, right?
So tell us a little bit about the book and what are some of the lessons. I know you presented at VMworld based off the book as well.
Did.
And from what I heard, the session went very well.
Oh, cool, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about that and the methodology behind that. And I should say, too, it's co-authored, too.
Oh, absolutely.
So get proper credit there.
Absolutely. So it's from the IT Process Institute. Now, they're the people who wrote the Visible Ops series. Visible Ops itself, the first in the 3-book series now, was originally intended very much as a practitioner's guide. In that case, mostly around service management and ITIL type of practices, but not the highfalutin strategic ITIL.
Right.
That actually help me get my job done ITIL.
Yes.
And there's a big difference there. The second one was Visible Ops Security, and that was written with luminaries in the security world like Jin Kim.
Okay.
And the third one was with Kurt Milne, who's with the IT Process Institute, and Jeannie Moraine, who's with Flexera.
Okay.
And between us, I think we added it up, and it was very disturbing. I think 60 years of experience in IT management.
Are you proud of it? Are you not?
I know, right? It's a bit of a concern, really. And it was interesting because the way we wrote the book was not really just us three writing it. We interviewed CIOs and VPs and directors and sysadmins and technical architects and so forth from around about 40 different companies.
Okay.
And I like to say, there's 3 names on the cover of the book, but there's about 45 people inside it.
Sure.
And we really tried to... The one thing that's really unique about the Visible Ops series is it takes real quotes from real people and talks about their problems and how they solved them. And so it is 4 practical steps on getting from virtualization to cloud. It doesn't get into, how do you configure and what ports do you open and stuff like that. But by the same token, it doesn't sit up at a strategic level that, you should do cloud because you'll be more agile.
Sure.
And so everyone who comes and talks to me about the book, and this is so reassuring, says pretty much the same thing. This is a really pragmatic, useful book. Mm-hmm. I had one guy who was fantastic. He came up at VMworld actually and told me how he bought copies for the rest of his team and refers to various chapters loudly in meetings, and that is just so cool. I love to hear that.
Yeah, and one thing I think it was in one of your blog posts you mentioned it's a book for doers, not just thinkers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. Very cool. So let's turn it back to CA World for a little bit quickly. Is there any big announcements? There's obviously there's the cloud track, and there seems to be just a lot of absolutely great, exciting sessions going on around cloud, around automation, a lot of the management and orchestration products that you offer. So what are some of the highlights people can expect from this week?
Yeah, this is actually going to be a really exciting week. We're looking at making cloud more agile. And I say it's a highfalutin word, cloud needs to be more agile, and it is. But when you start to bring it down to some of the products we're releasing this week around how to make the choice of which applications to move to the cloud, when, why, which clouds to use, and which applications to not move to the cloud, that's actually a very legitimate decision. Looking at how to secure the cloud, there's security announcements, but again, we've got new products coming out. Mm-hmm. Fantastic things around identity and access management for cloud-based applications. Mm-hmm. So connecting, the ability to use AWS, the ability to use Salesforce.com with your internal existing security to take away some of this concern. Again, whether it's real or not, the concern is real.
Yep.
And so those sorts of things. Looking at obviously the performance management side, we've got some other products coming out. So there's a whole handful. And most of it's actually happening tomorrow, so I can't give you too many specifics.
What if I promise not to publish till tomorrow? No, that's fine. Absolutely.
But it is very exciting. I mean, again, making agile choices is something that we want to help our customers to be able to do, and that's essentially what we're driving at with all these product announcements.
Sure. And something else I think you might have mentioned in your book or a blog post, I just remember it somewhere, of design services, not systems.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the key of where you're going with that, and especially when it comes to, say, the applications, when you say some are ready and some aren't, and there's many in the cloud space that say, well, you pretty much just need to rewrite everything from the ground up, and it's going to happen over time, right? But it's not today.
Most of them run public clouds, Aaron.
Yes. Well, and where I'm going with that is first of all, that's absolutely spot on, right? It's all around the needs of the business. Mm-hmm. How are you going to meet the needs of the business? But the needs of the business may not be rewrite your app to be agile and cloud ready.
Yeah.
Right? There's some things that might be migratable, and there's some things that might not be migratable for whatever reasons, right? And so that's really interesting going forward, because how much of that adoption are you seeing today, and how fast do you think we will change over time into that futuristic cloud-based, every application or every service everywhere on any device? Where do we go from where we are today to the future, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually segregate the sort of services we look at in the cloud between cloud migrant services and cloud native services. Okay. And there are actually also rogue cloud services and even cloud free services.
Sure.
So the whole idea of design services, not servers, and I'm not going to take credit for that line. I don't think it was actually me who wrote it, but it is from the book.
Okay.
And it's definitely something that I repeat quite regularly. Is servers bad, systems better, services good, right?
Okay.
Because that's the way I think of it. You've got to think about what is the service that you're trying to deliver, and some of it is going to be a case of cloud migration.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to migrate services, and in the book we talk about the idea of lift and shift.
Sure.
And so you lift an application, and you pick it up, and you drop it down on a cloud provider, and so you've got then a cloud migrant service. But then there's a whole bunch of stuff you do have to design from scratch. Some of the things I think of really strongly there: business analytics, big data type applications, BI, social. Mobile applications that are using large amounts of data that are scattered geographically. These are more cloud native applications, cloud native services. You build them in the cloud, for the cloud, they run in the cloud, and they live in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Then there is, of course, the rogue cloud, which we've spoken about. Mm-hmm. And cloud free. There's some services for some organizations that are not going to run in the cloud. So this is the sort of differentiation that I think of. How it's going to take different approaches to get those different applications into the cloud.
Sure.
For some of the lift and shift stuff, it's going to be a case of packaging it up, trying to detangle all the spaghetti that is a service in the modern world. It's funny how we draw in diagrams nice pretty 3-tier architectures and stuff. But then you look at someone's actual network architecture diagram of even just a single service, and it's like, wow, where does that start and the edge of the whiteboard finish?
Yes.
So untangling it, getting this portfolio view, that's actually stage one in the 4-stage process in the book, is cut through the cloud clutter. Understand what is your portfolio, get a portfolio view of your service environment, start to divvy it up into what I can move, what I can't move. That's the first stage, is understanding what services have you got and what can you do with them.
It's actually interesting how much the evolution of VCE and the VCE message kind of dovetails directly into that. Early on we were fighting the systems battle, the servers battle, right? How does the stack look? How does it get put together? What can I do? What knobs can I turn? And as we've continued down that path, what we've turned into is what I call the infrastructure is boring phase, right? The infrastructure is important only in that it gives your customers a sense of confidence, right? Performance-wise, availability-wise, but really the discussion with customers on how to utilize that, be it private cloud or be it a service provider who's looking to stand up a managed private cloud type environment, is operationally, why does this make sense to the business? Mm-hmm. Why does it make sense to your customers' businesses? Why does it make sense to your own business? And how do you put the tools in place to be able to use that infrastructure to its fullest extent and turn that into as much of a service as you can? And so it's interesting that a company who only sells hardware and a company that only sells software are both looking at that environment kind of through the same, through the same prism. And I think we've come to much the same conclusion there, that it's going to be the management, the orchestration. It's going to be the stack that sits on top of the infrastructure that ends up being the differentiator there at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting in the keynote today, Mike Capellas actually said, you've got to raise it up the stack. It's got to be about business services. Yeah. And I really liked a line that Vivek Kundra had. People don't care how many data centers you've got. They care how long they have to wait in line at the DMV.
Right. Right.
It's fantastic.
And that for me epitomizes the difference between caring about your infrastructure and caring about your business service.
Right. No end user has ever cared what fabric switch you were using.
Exactly.
If the application is available and if the application performs the way they need it to, the rest of it could be off in a third planet, and no one's going to care about it. The application is what ends up ruling the day.
Very cool. So I'm actually going to turn it away from cloud for 1 second.
Ooh. There's something else?
I was going to say there's more than cloud.
So this brings up something else. You're credited with the term virtual stall. And so actually this goes back a bit. I want to say it was Cloudcast number 5, if I remember correctly, with Steve Kaplan.
Oh, yeah.
Of INX fame, now Presidio. By the way, congratulations, Steve. With the Presidio acquisition of INX. But he gave you credit for the virtual stall term, and he said VDI specifically at the time we were discussing how big of a factor it was. And we spoke to him probably back in February, March of this year. Is that something you're still seeing in the enterprise today?
It actually is. And I'm surprised at one side that I'm still seeing it this far on. That was, I think, back in 2010, early 2010, I think it was, when I first started to see that. It was just after I'd left EMA, the analyst firm I was with. And at EMA, we had great data, and I did primary research, but I only had one data set to work with, because I didn't have a subscription to Gartner and Forrester and Live1 and IDC and all that. So it was, I was like a kid in a candy store when I came out to CA, and I had access to all this data, and I saw this trend. And so that was quite some time ago, that's 18 months ago, and I knew it was real, I knew it was happening. I talked to a lot of people about it, and even last week I was at a seminar down in Houston, talking to some people down there about their virtualization and looking around the room. And it's a question I always ask: how virtualized are you? What's the ratio? And most of that room was under 50%, still 40 something percent. One guy said 80%, right, which is, I mean, phenomenal. I think. And most of them were still below 50%. And I really thought that even 18 months on we'd be 60, 65, but I'm still seeing it, and it's still not a technology problem. Right. It's still about management process, about policy, about server huggers, about politics, about choosing the right applications, and don't touch my application, use that guy's application to try this stuff out on. And it's really quite disturbing.
And let me ask you this: does the virtual stall concept transition over to the cloud? Because a lot of people say you don't need virtualization for cloud, and that's very true. But at the same time, is that same theory potentially going to hold true? Of you might see some cloud introduction, you might see you get to a certain point, and then it just kind of does the same stall.
Yeah, it's something that someone pointed out at the time, maybe in one of my in the comments to one of my blogs about this, was that it may not be necessarily unique to virtualization. It could be just because virtualization was such a fundamental change, and human beings are resistant to change. A lot of us don't like change, and cloud is another fundamental change, and I think it's going to apply to cloud as well. I think, especially when you talk about public cloud, which is so much more of a fundamental change than private cloud, because private cloud can be very evolutionary. People who are comfortable with virtualization, they add the automation and standardization and self-service and that sort of stuff on top of it.
They're changing how they consume, not what they consume.
Yeah, but when you go to public cloud, that's a good way of putting it. They're changing what you consume at that point, and that's much more fundamental. So I think it is going to be an issue. And again, I don't know that it's going to be one of technology. Technology's easy. People are hard.
Well, and I think that there's a discussion that that came out as part of the blog post. Could Amazon Web Services have been built on a VBlock? Right. Yes. Which was just my spur of the moment 2:00 in the morning response to some fairly energetic Twitter cloud talk. And I think that there comes a point where the workloads that you have, whether that's traditional workloads that are looking to be virtualized, or whether that's application workloads that have the ability to be put into the public cloud, you run into a point where you've just run out of them, right? As an enterprise, right? And why you run out of them, there may be different reasons. You may run out of them because you're not comfortable with virtualizing any further. You may not have the financial benefit of virtualizing them any further, right? That last 30-40% virtualization, you're really not seeing direct capital cost savings. You're starting to get into the operational and the consumption cost savings. And I think that there are businesses that don't see those the same way they see how much am I going to be able to keep my budget static. And so you run into a point where you just don't have workloads that you're prepared to virtualize anymore, and so that's where you see that stall. And I think on the public cloud side, I think that there are any number of applications that are very easy to put into a cloud, right? Mostly by companies who have a very small number of applications that they provide as their primary line of business. So you talk about the Netflix, you talk about the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, where it's not an enterprise IT shop that has dozens and dozens of applications. There's a small number of applications that are being consumed by enormous numbers of people, but they translate well to that public cloud consumption model. I think at some point you run out of easy apps to move. And so now, much like virtualization, you've got to start digging deep into the fundamentals of, am I prepared to take this legacy application and invest in completely rewriting it, or finding a vendor who has already rewritten it and move that to the cloud? And so on both sides, whether that's the virtualization or the cloud side, I think at some point, it's not that the glass is full, it's that there's no more water.
Yeah, it's a very good point. You're always going to have, there's always infamous pictures of, the boards in the airports, the departure ones, and that, something's blue screened on Windows NT, right? It doesn't translate well, and you're never going to get off that platform, or if you do, it's so cost prohibitive, or whatever, right? So yeah.
And the service providers are sitting in the middle, and I think that the service providers are in the perfect spot to be that transition buffer, right? Because on one side, they can allow you to continue to consume the way you're consuming, but they're also starting to make you think about how the operational costs of things are important, right? Because you don't have to worry about necessarily capital cost anymore. You're changing the model of how you're paying for what you're consuming, which I think in most of the customers that we talk to, since primarily the organizations that I deal with at VC are service providers, most of the time getting into that model helps start that sea change in not necessarily pushing everything to the public cloud, but understanding from an internal IT perspective, how do I pitch the public cloud as a business benefit and not just as the easy way to do something or the fast way or the cool way of doing something? Because at the end of the day, most CFOs, most CIOs, they really do want to see a business return on that type of investment. And I think the service providers will end up being in an interesting place to handle the outflow of the I don't want to be in a data center business anymore, right? My core competency is not IT, but will also be the interface that allows you to start moving those workloads to a more public type cloud, or even being able to move those to a fully public type cloud. So both from a CA standpoint as well as from a VCE standpoint, we're seeing lots of very interesting conversations with systems integrators, with service providers, all of whom kind of feel that pull in both directions. Short term, I've got people who just want to keep consuming, right? Private cloud, hosted private cloud, those things are important. But long term, I think everybody sees that if the application's the only thing that matters, at some point we just need to worry about the application. And the whole legacy virtualized stack doesn't necessarily take that into account very well.
Very cool. All right, so we're about out of time for this week. Jeremiah, time for you to pimp your stuff. Where can people follow you, find out more about you, read blogs, Twitter, whatever?
So I'm on Twitter. It's jdooley_CLT. The blog is VM for SP at typepad.com. And I will be in Raleigh for the Internet Summit 2011. We're doing a track on virtualization. So specifically, we'll be talking about management and orchestration. And I have a slide that has 60-point font that says "Infrastructure is boring."
Nice.
So it should be a good time. So anybody who's going to be out there, say hi.
Great. And Andy, how about you? Where can people find out more about you?
Gee, people need to figure out how can they avoid me. The primary place I blog is on my own blog at pleasediscuss.com/AndyMann. That's ANDIMANN. Of course, I'm all over Twitter, unfortunately, for most of the tweet stream, at Andi Mann. Also, I blog at the CA.com communities website quite prolifically.
Great. And that's it for this week. You can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcastnet or reach us at thecloudcast.net, where you'll find links to the show and show notes. You can leave us a comment, send us an email, or details on how to stream us on Stitcher. Thanks for listening.